what I bring to this education debate is specific to my own experience in public education. Before I get to that, I'll just, if you're looking at the notes, you'll notice that I've worked with Uniting for Children and Youth over the last years, and it was primarily trying to build the conversation in my city of Ottawa, Canada. We put on a child-friendly community conference during the World Children's Day in 2020. And I've been heavily engaged in school board elections, both in the year 2018 and 2022 through Uniting for Children and Youth. And just recently, I've decided I'm going to concentrate more of my effort on presenting my particular views. I have felt that people weren't ready for them, or that they're just, I was knocking my head against the wall too much presenting them. But with the whole generation of this global conversation about the future of education, I feel that there's opportunity now to get those ideas discussed more. And I really appreciate the Learning Planet Institute providing the festival as a safe place to share views. I repeat often the John Dewey description of open-mindedness, which is what we need to fully assess everybody's views, and that is that open-mindedness is the active desire to listen to more sides than one. The quote is wrong there. It was, I dictated it and obviously didn't correct it. So it's the active desire to listen to more sides than one, to give heed to the facts from whatever source they come, to give full attention to alternative possibilities, and to recognize the possibility of error, even in the policies that are dearest to us. I didn't realize I hadn't edited this after dictating it, so it's a bit of a mess there, but you get the idea of what it is. And the particular perspective that I'm bringing to the issue that I would like to have discussed is I've worked in public education for 40 years, more than 40 years. I strongly believe in public education as our nation builder, our community builder, as our way to create equality. And 90% of children in Canada go to public school. So if we want to talk about transforming education, we have to talk about transforming school systems. And I have in the notes that I'm a disciple of SDE. I use the word disciple because I'm a full proponent of self-directed education. I've fully subscribed, and it took years for me to get to this point, fully subscribed to the idea of full human rights for young people, and that they need to be self-directed in what they're learning. And I've come to see mental health as a focal point, as priority number one. The Ottawa branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association has social justice and self-determination as its top core values on its website. And so from that, I derive this little formula, which is that mental health equals social justice plus self-determination. And the social justice to me is that children walk into their places of learning feeling completely equal to others. No one's feeling inferior or superior. And we're just all people appreciating each other, celebrating diversity, and living our lives without discrimination. And that includes adultism, that we don't have adults who are in any way powering over or coercing students, that it's a working together process. This quote by Leela Watson is the person who has termed it this way, but she has taken it from the thoughts of Aboriginal activists from Queensland in 1970. And that is that if you've come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So this is, to me, the essence of what equality is all about. There's no ageism, no adultism in there. It's just people who accept each other on equal terms, full human rights for all, and we live together with that kind of respect for each other. To presume to teach someone, this is what we do in schools typically, that you have the teacher with the assumption being that they have something to teach somebody else, that they are in some way superior. A short couple of tasks that I would like you to do at this point. I'd like you to reflect for a moment on when there was a time that you were totally engaged in what you were doing, to the point that you were oblivious to everything else that was going on around you. So totally engaged, and to put in chat what it was and a word to describe how you felt from it. So that moment of total engagement, if you can bring yourself back to a time when you felt that way, and the feeling that it gave you. The idea of flow, obviously, people are understanding that. The idea being that if we can think in terms of when we're totally engaged, and there are a lot of times like that in childhood when you are, we want to extend that into the learning environments as children get older. Try not to deviate from that. And that's not to say that you can live in a state of flow all the time, but that is what the learning needs to focus on. So now the second task, which in the notes I've got as a secret task, what I'd like you to do is recall how you felt when you were being coerced to learn something that you had no interest in learning, and maybe put a word or two to that effect in chat. So not to labor this too much, I see the feelings coming through that are pretty common to us. And the reason I emphasize this at this point is that an education system, as much as possible, needs to keep flow going and not have people coerced to learn things that they have no interest in. One of them promotes a main piece of advice we see over and over again, which is know thyself. You can't know yourself if you're being coerced all the time to do what other people want you to do. And that feeling of being coerced is, it creates feelings of oppression, which result in backlash and rebellion. And so we want to think in terms of an education environment where you have flow going and there's not that negative feeling of coercion taking place. So that brings us to the idea of the bad joke. I was such a great learner, and then I went to school. The questions are, what kind of learning environment can keep the joy of learning alive? How can the responsibility for learning be kept with the learner? And how is the real world brought to the attention of young people? That third point is one that I picked up from literature that Daniel Greenberg put together with his Sudbury Valley School, where he said that the purpose of a school, main purpose of a school, is to bring the real world to the attention of young people. And so an environment that would cultivate that. And then the fourth point is, how can we maximize sparking? And if you're unfamiliar with the word sparking, it's what we see on the playground, where you have young kids watching older kids doing things that they would like to do. And so they're intrigued by that. They want to follow them. Anytime you have somebody who's doing something that excites somebody else, makes them want to learn more about it, that's referred to as sparking. So what kind of learning environment can we create where there's a lot of sparking going on? New directions need to take a bigger picture look at what we're trying to do. And in this particular situation, if we're talking about education, we can't just be talking about the education of an individual child or improving a particular school. We need to look at it within the context of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Education is number 4 among them, but there are all the other ones of how we create a sustainable world. And that's with education, we've got to be looking at providing learning environments where we're not requiring all kinds of transportation to be taking place. So get the school buses off the roads as much as possible. Not have parents driving their kids to schools across town. Make the community school the hub of learning. The goal to make it the school that everybody in that community wants to attend and is serving their needs. So focus in on community that way. So it's not just a case of helping to solve the environmental problem. You're also helping to build community. When we have school choice, which generally means going to a school other than your neighborhood school, what you create with that is a me first mentality. I'm going to get the best for my child, even if it means I have to drive them across town, because I want them to be able to get into the best university. And what we do is change the focus instead, that we make our community school the best possible education that the students can get. And at the same time, build community around it. If you have children going to school in their own neighborhoods, you can cultivate that whole idea of active and safe routes to school, which is related to healthy living, as well as non-polluting living. And if you're walking to school with your friends, you're building community in the process. And you can have older siblings walking with younger ones, and it's neighborhood, it's community that you're cultivating doing that. And so the solution that we'd be looking for with imagining the future of education is one that is really cultivating community, but not in isolation. The sparking possibilities can be greatly enhanced by having students in one school community doing things outside that community for a day, a week, or longer, and coming back to their own school and sparking the friends they have there with what they've learned while they were away. There are 4 approaches or starting points that are being suggested for transforming public education. I mentioned Derry when he signed on, and Derry and I were involved during the pandemic in founding a group called Unschooling School. And the person who really got that going, Heather McTaggart, had this idea of free learners. And the free learner is conceived as somebody who can go into a school and say that I don't really want to do everything that you're imposing on me. I would like to be able to do things my way. And so can I do this? Can I do that? And in this case, there's a little clip that we've had. I don't have the link for it here now. I should have put it in, but it's called the responsible subversive. And it's just a couple of minute clip that we took from a meeting where Derry was talking about the kind of administrator or teacher that we would like to see in a school who welcomes the free learner. So when the child comes in what would be a typical school and says, I want to do things differently, the person that they say it to would say, well, that sounds interesting. Let's see what the possibilities are for that. And they can have a good discussion then about bending the rules a little bit. The student will become aware of what the restrictions are on the staff in the school, but they can make room for them in some way and build an individual program. So what kind of person does the free learner encounter? Derry's idea of the 20% project, which is the next of the four that I presented here, is that at least 20%, and his dream is that gradually it grows to be 100%. But you start with 20% of the child's school time is dedicated to free learning, that they can choose what they want to learn during that time. We've seen genius programs in some schools that they give an hour on the last hour on Friday to letting students pursue whatever kind of learning they would want. First of all, it's too little time, and it's too late in the day. It's like a little tack on. Whereas what Derry is suggesting here is a full 20%, a full day a week, and not necessarily a full day. It might be an hour a day, but a substantial amount of time for students to pursue what they want. And as people get accustomed to it, to increase the percentage to a higher amount. I should just put into chat again the link to this document that I'm referring to, notes for this presentation, because it contains links to Derry's 20% proposal, which is published on the Progressive Education website, which is worth exploring. And it also gives a link to Derry's book. And I wonder, Derry, just to give people a little relief from me, would you say a word or two about your book and particularly that chapter 6 where you're working with those 11-year-olds?
I didn't enjoy school much, so it was strange really to choose teaching as a career. But after I left school, I had some experiences working, for example, in a group therapy unit with adolescents in a psychiatric hospital, where the treatment was basically sitting around, getting to know yourself and getting to know each other with a minimal medication possible and no physical treatments like ECT or whatever. And then I discovered this guy, A.S. Neal, who wrote books about Summerhill and about the idea of freedom but not license, and the idea of a democratic school. So I got a job in a state school where I thought I'd try it out. I sort of half expected to be fired. I had this class of 35 11-year-olds, and the head teacher wanted to keep the sort of continuity of one teacher with a class that they'd had in the elementary school and the primary school. So I was the teacher, the class teacher for history, geography, English, social studies, and religious knowledge. It was about 50% of curriculum time. And I was given lots of stuff I was supposed to teach. But we didn't teach most of it. We started sitting, the kids sat round in a circle with me and we talked about what these subjects were. And the kids realized that actually those 5 subjects covered just about everything in the world that you could possibly want to study. So we ran the class as a class democracy, with the kids choosing on the whole what to do. There were some kids who did say at first, I'm not sure what to do. So I had some sort of material, some worksheets, some work, some reading for them to do. But And I often hear it said, actually, that these methods, child-centered learning, is much more difficult for working class kids. The middle class kids have lots of stimulus at home. I actually think there's a little bit of truth in this, but unless school has completely killed the curiosity of working class kids, which I don't believe it has on the whole, they soon that those that found it difficult to know what to do soon start developing their own ideas, especially when they see other people doing it as well. So we ran the class as a democracy with a lot of self-directed learning, and to my amazement, it was a big success. The parents were very supportive because these kids at 11 had just failed a selection exam called the 11 plus at the time in England, where if you passed it, you were about 10 or 15% of the kids who would have some chance of going on to university went to grammar schools, but 85% of the kids who failed this test went to a secondary modern school. It was one of those schools I was working in. So the parents had already decided that their kids were academically not very bright, and this had had a very damaging effect on the kids. So when the parents saw the kids getting really interested in studies, really interested in learning about things they wanted to learn about, I suddenly found I had a great deal of support from the parents who were very excited to see their kids kind of recovering their self-confidence and self-esteem. Anyway, after a year, I thought I'd probably get fired, but I didn't. I got put in charge of 7 classes. As these kids got a year older and moved up a year in the school, I got him put in charge of all the classes. And it was a fairly amazing experience because some teachers didn't want to work in this way, but some did. So as a teacher in their second year of teaching, I was able to more or less choose the teaching team that would work with the 230 kids. The whole thing functioned as a learning community, but I've already said too much, Richard. The thing is, years after I'd moved on, about 40 years later, 35 years later, some of these kids got in touch with me and said, "Hey, you're still up to your crazy ideas. We've found you on the internet." And I met up with them again and we talked about it and decided, well, we really ought to write a book about this because you've now had 35 years of post-democratic class life. How's it worked out? And what did that class offer you that may have been a hindrance or a help in your life? So we wrote a book about it, and it's called Another Way is Possible, Becoming a Democratic Teacher in a State School. Stop. I've finished, Richard. That's much too much. You should have shut me up.
So that provides a nice lead in also, but just before I go to that third way of or third starting point for transforming public education, just to reemphasize, I could have actually Derry's single grade 11-year-old experience with one group like that as a third possibility, just the teacher creating a democratic environment. So the gradual movement towards teachers becoming more democratic. And Derry's book is a nice guide to how they might do that and engage the students in decision making in the class. There's obviously limitations to that. And one thing that I like that Derry has said is that he didn't just give the students carte blanche and said, do whatever you want. He had a condition on it that if it's not working out, he's going to take charge again. And so there was that overtone that we can't just dissolve into bedlam. It's got to be something that's workable. From Derry's work, probably as much as anybody's, a fellow in Estonia, Charlie Marino Romero, created the school Suvame. He and Derry were involved in a presentation earlier in the Learning Planet Festival about it. There's a film that's been done by Quest, which is the Quality Education for Sustainable Social Transformation, working in Europe. And You have this documentary, 37-minute documentary about this democratic school in Estonia that is a school within a school. And so it's a democratic school, publicly funded, supported by the administration. And Charlie's been able to create the kind of atmosphere within a public school system that for him, it's close. For Charlie, that is, it's close to what he perceives to be an ideal learning environment, which might come back to being similar to the Summerhill or the Sudbury Valley model for it. What I'm wanting to put on the table is another approach here, which I've termed a short-term lived experience. And I call it an accidental prototype of what we could be developing, because it turned out to be not what I originally proposed with a colleague of mine to the principal. We initially proposed a Sudbury Valley type of learning environment. Can we just have 25 students and do with them whatever they want to do for the day? And of course, the principal said, absolutely no way are you going to be able to do that. And so we ended up with a program that to me, I'm really glad that the principal said that he couldn't get us permission to do what we wanted to do, that we had to work with him. And he was a responsible subversive who had a lot of union experience. And he helped us come up with a proposal that met all of the school board and government and union requirements that got closer to self-directed learning than most students ever get to experience. And so we ended up developing that program, and it ran in the early 1990s. And so since then, there's been a lot of imagining of the possibilities that kind of program offered for transitioning to a new age of learning. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that this process of transforming education has to be approached with the entrepreneurial mindset, that all four methods that I've just outlined need to be approached with the research and development mentality, the scientific mind. I term where we're at right now with the development of the new age of learning as us being only at the Kitty Hawk stage of education. We have good examples of places where the democratic model is working well, and yet it's like a kitty hawk compared to what it could be. And so we want to provide the public resources, fully backed public resources. We could go ahead and create all the research and development necessary to take a fledgling vision for transforming education to fruition and actually create this supersonic age of learning. The potential with all the technology that we have, individualized learning, the idea of age mixing, which I would like, we're starting to put a lot of attention on the whole idea of intergenerational learning, which is often perceived as adults working with children more. But it's the whole idea of age mixing too. Any difference in age, you're going to be creating more opportunities for the sparking that I mentioned earlier. And so really trying to get the minds together with public support, public funding, to really develop the new age of learning. We're mostly, and we see it with the Learning Planet, we're mostly at this point imagining the possibilities. what we need to do is start creating more pilot programs that actually uncover for us the possibilities. I think the term pioneer of possibilities is something that you coined, Derry. So learning from history, we're caught actually right now in the competition of paradigms. Thomas Kuhn, in his work with paradigm shifts, one of the things that he observed is that they compete, and that the dominant paradigm does what it can to keep any contender out of sight. And we're really in that situation. Those school board elections that I was very involved in here in Ottawa were a perfect example of how the old paradigm keeps the new ideas out of sight. I couldn't get past the school councils, which were largely controlled by principals who are largely controlled by the school board. We wanted to create opportunities for unknown candidates to be heard, and they across the board, the schools did not respond by providing meetings for these candidates to get known. And so that's just one example of how you can be restricted in what you're trying to do if you're a competing paradigm. The lesson, if we're to learn from history, the lesson that we need to apply is that if an old paradigm, a paradigm that appears to have outlived its usefulness, is dominating too much, we have to level the playing field, make it possible for people to explore the new paradigm, a promising contender, to test out just what the possibilities are for it. And we're seeing from democratic schools, mostly on the private side, but we saw it with Souvame. Also, Yakovech in Israel has been responsible for the establishing of somewhere in the range of 30 publicly funded democratic schools. So there is movement happening that way. But the idea that we're pursuing is that we've got to get that generally out into the public, this idea of the paradigm shift. And so to level the playing field, make it possible where you have communities that want to explore it, that they have that right, that we've got two paradigms on an equal footing. Go into your local school and choose the one that would work best for you, the model that would work best for you. So the CHIP program, or this program that I'm talking about, began with CHIP as kind of a prototype, and features of it are that the program met all of the government, school board, and teacher union requirements. Our supportive principal had the experience to make sure that we weren't going to end up with nothing because we weren't honoring enough that we were up against bureaucracies. It provided an extended immersive experience in self-directed education. And the point here is that it's not enough to see something or to know that it exists. You have to actually live it. I was a promoter or a follower of self-directed learning long before I established the program that I was given a chance to establish. But it wasn't until I actually experienced the program that I had that aha feeling that once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you've got to do something about it. It was, and just a little background first. I became aware of the Sudbury Valley School in the late 80s, and got in touch with Daniel Greenberg. I wanted to go and visit it, he said, no, we don't allow visitors. We don't want it to seem like kids are in a fishbowl. We want them just to be let be. And so it's really only parents that are allowed to visit the school. You have to have your kids enrolled there. So he bent the rules for me, and I was allowed to enroll my two children in the school during our March break, which didn't coincide with theirs. So I got to go to Sudbury Valley for a week and observe it with my wife and my children. Driving back from there, we had lots of time to discuss. It's in Boston, we're in Ottawa. And none of us could say that it sold us. And the reason that I've concluded is that you really do have to live the experience. And when I did that with this program that the principal helped us to get going, I lived that. I got to see what the students were like when they came in, and then what they were like 6 weeks later. And it was a transformation. They went from being bored, from being angry, their eyes kind of dull and glassed over, to being alive again. And when you see young people come to life and you realize that the reason they were not so alive was because of the environment that they were being kept in, it's hard not to then get on the bandwagon and try to create change. The big thing that the program did was it eliminated formal scheduling. And formal scheduling has been identified as, it's in the movie and the book Beyond Measure, defined as the single greatest impediment to educational innovation. If you're lockstepping students through the day from class to class, you don't have the flexibility that you need in order to really get at their learning needs. And so the elimination of scheduling was a big component of this particular effort to transform education. Easy enrollment. So you have that level playing field where it's as easy to enroll in the alternative program or in this other paradigm as it is to take part in the established one. And so it's a case of easy opt-in, opt-out. I'll mention that in just a moment. There's no coercion for the students to take the program, no coercion for the teachers to take it. And so it was two teachers, myself and my colleague, that proposed it. So obviously we're not coerced to do it. But even if you're putting it into another school somewhere, the idea would be that you have two teachers that want to do it, or a teacher that wants to do it. Nobody coerced to do it. If you try to run a program like this and the teachers feel coerced to run it, you're almost setting it up for failure, because it won't be carrying the spirit of a democratic school and equality empowerment for the young people. And so the idea of the non-coercion, very important. There were two criteria for students to enroll in the program. One was that they were coming to school to learn, because we were addressing that concern that if kids were not being controlled by the teacher, they would just goof off and not do anything useful. So they had to agree that they were coming to school to learn. And they had to agree also to creating a community of learners. And that's where the cross age comes in, that we're going to be working together as co-learners. To put two ideas under the same roof on competing equal level, you need to minimize, or in order to get people to enroll in the program, you need to minimize the obstacles to it. And so this program ran as a single semester program at the start of one school year. that meant that students would take it for a semester and then they go back to the regular system. And the way it evolved is it ran a second year as well, and students were allowed to opt into it again for a second year. And those who wanted to stay in the regular program could just remain there. And so you had this easy opt-in, opt-out situation. Where it really seemed to work was from the first year to the second year. The first year, we were all stumbling, trying to figure out how to deal with this. The second year, we had it kind of figured out, and we had a lot of returning students. And so they had a semester back in the regular system, which they adjusted to fine, going back there. And then they had a summer to contemplate what they were going to do this new school year, knowing that they were going to be going back into this self-directed learning program. And what happened was that stumbling around that we did the first year didn't happen the second year. The returning students were just full speed ahead doing what they wanted to do. And the new students had them as models and just kind of fell into doing the same thing, so that we had that modeling that allowed us to move right on to something that was just impressive right from the start. The program itself, it focuses on, and just before I get to that, the ministry, the school board required the students to still take the mandated curriculum, which in this semestered school meant that they were enrolled in 4 courses and expected to achieve the outcomes of those courses. And so they had these 4 courses that they were having to take. And what we found was that they accomplished the learning or the outcomes for those courses in a fraction of the time that it would take them if they were lockstepping through the course with a teacher-directed environment. They were able to integrate their courses to make them more meaningful. And the focus of the learning was not on the content of the courses. It was on developing the skills to be independent learners for life. And so the skills that were required, the knowledge that's required to be a good learner, was the primary curriculum. And those skills were applied on the required ministry curriculum. And again, the students were able to accomplish that in a fraction of the time, which left them with a substantial amount of time to pursue their passions. An observation, I'm just checking my notes here for a moment. When we talk to parents about that, and this is something that I understand more in hindsight because of how the world's developed, in getting parent cooperation with this kind of program, you can present it as a no-lose situation. For a semester, the students are going to be developing the let's say, employability skills, but I'd call them just the life skills that people need to succeed today. And at the same time, they're still getting their credits, so they're not dropping behind their cohorts as far as graduation is concerned. So it's one semester to test it out. Scalability would suggest that if students find that it works for them, then let them enroll again as long as they want, or go back to the regular system. I mentioned that students integrated their courses, and that was particularly seen with a group of students that their curriculum required them to study Macbeth, and the courses that they had to work on were math, computers, art, and English. They took their 4 courses and integrated them into producing a Shakespearean play on Macbeth. And so they did the English and the acting as part of that credit. The backdrop that they made became their art credit, or contributed to that. The technology side of it, computers, they work towards their credit by filming it, editing it, doing computer work on it, and then the creating of the set itself. They were able to include some math skills with that, and so they had fun achieving the requirements of their courses, and they couldn't have done that if they didn't have that flexibility. Sudbury Valley School said that their secret weapon was the age mixing, what it was that students learned from each other. And so there was an age mixed component to this. Derry's 11-year-old group indicates that you can go a long way towards creating a vibrant learning environment without age mixing. But when you add in age mixing, you're tapping into what I consider to be the most squandered resource in public education today, that ability of learning through cross ages. And it doesn't go just one way. The older students are learning how to communicate and relate to younger people, and to build their skills of nurturing, their caring skills. The mechanics of this program that I'm discussing here are that it was a single class, one class, where students were together all day. There were 25 students, grades 10 to 12, a good cross section of the general school population. And we were very conscious of, we don't want this to be a program that is perceived to be special ed for students that can't cope with the regular system. We wanted to provide an example of how mainstream education can be different. And so we had a good mix of students there, from gifted to others who were on the verge of dropping out, to others that were engaged in different ways in their schooling. There were 2 of us involved. I worked in the program in the morning, and my cohort co-teacher was working with them in the afternoon. So we maintained that pupil-teacher ratio that school boards require. The 4 subjects I mentioned were the math, English, art, computers, and with the different age groups and students working on what were considered basic, general, or advanced courses. There were actually 32 different course credits being worked on in the class at that time. The room, or the group, was handled as a democratic community, one person, one vote. I've learned a lot about sociocracy since running that program, and I would say that the decisions actually got made more on a sociocratic basis than on a democratic basis. We rarely took a vote, that it was almost always agreement. And how the environment works, there's another film, there's Souvame, that I mentioned previously, but also School Circles is a really good documentary film about 6 schools in the Netherlands that work on democratic principles. In our program, we set up a judicial committee, which we never had to use except one time, when the students brought me up because they found that I was being coercive, and they were right. I was starting to worry that they weren't going to achieve the requirements on their courses that were expected, and that the program would be canceled as a result. And so they brought me up, held me to account, And it created a discussion that was really a valuable discussion about making sure that you preserve what you want. You don't want to have adults powering over you, and so it was a great learning moment that was well worth me having to eat my words over how I was behaving. I have some slides that I'm going to show you here. I'll just share my screen. So this is just the heading, and what I wanted to do was bring in other groups that I'm really pleased to be aware of and that I'm now working with. The Why Not campaign is that program by a youth in Kenya who's wanting to create a world conversation with a billion youth. Big Education Conversation is big change organization that is using this idea of the big education conversation as a way to get us discussing globally in groups all over the place the future of education, our concerns about it. I've become involved this past year with My Life, My Education, which is a group of people particularly concerned about promoting the human rights of young people, full human rights, and democratic education. The goal of it was to be, or is to be, and Peter Bergson, who's on this call, was one of the people that really drove it in this direction, was to create a sustainable global action campaign to raise awareness around human rights and the democratic approach to education. And then the groups along the bottom are ones that are involved with the Learning Planet Festival. I mentioned this quote before, and I just wanted to bring it up for emphasis that if you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. I take that as the starting point for relationships in a learning environment. Leela Watson is the person who shares the quote that way, but she claims to have just put it together on the basis of the essence of something that Aboriginal activists said in Queensland in 1970. This is a little image depiction of what I see as where we're at in education. On the right, you have the very coercive form of education, and on the left, the non-coercive, completely non-coercive, with terms that describe each on both sides of this this image. And I have it that we're moving in the direction of self-direction, the empowerment of youth, but high schools typically are stuck with this formal scheduling that until they get rid of that, they can't allow students to explore in meaningful ways the things they want to learn. The school day is so confined that they can't head off somewhere to learn something different without being told that they're going to get behind in some course that they're supposed to attend and so on. So you have the coercive side there. There's still people that want a very structured, formal school system. Don't change it, just make it better attitude, where there is growing feeling that we can't make it better without changing it, and that we need to move towards that left side where students are more empowered. The program that I ran, that CHIP program, took place in this high school in Ottawa, Lester B. Pearson High School. And if you look at the top corner of the school, that's the room that we had for the program that I ran. And so it was just within a typical school, one classroom. This is a general representation of what it meant. It's a program, it's self-directed education. It's the new paradigm, obviously not fully because of the students having to follow the general school rules, and they still had ministry curriculum, but they were able to approach their learning in the way that they wanted to. And so it's one classroom right within the school mix, and so it's very visible, very accessible. The more visible the alternative is, the more likely people are going to start to make themselves aware of it. The school classroom that we had on the corner here, it was at the top of a staircase so that the students could use the balcony of the staircase. It's a quiet place for reading or working together. They could use the hallway. They could also easily get outside to the track and the field that was behind it. This is what the classroom looked like. It was a very decent high school classroom with windows on the two sides. Right now, this picture I took this week of it, and it's back to looking like a fairly regular school classroom. One difference that's happened over time is that the teacher desk is now at the back of the class, whereas it was at the front of the class when my colleague and I first started working on the program. We went in early, end of summer, a week early, to decide what we're going to do with the program. We went to see the classroom. It had all these desks lined up facing the front. And so we started thinking, what are we going to do with this room to make it a proper learning environment? And my colleague said, I don't think we should be deciding that. I think the students should decide that. And so he and I then scoured the school for all kinds of things that they might want to have in the room. We got all the books and syllabuses together that they would need for a semester of self-directed learning. And so when the students arrived, it was like a very disorganized storage room. And we just gave them the task right away of setting it up the way they thought it would be most workable for them. We had said that, take a few days, don't rush into this, because you may get ideas of how you want to do it differently over time. And the first day they couldn't wait. They just went at it and got it all set up in this kind of configuration. The door was over on the lower right, and so you come in the door, and there were some desks and a table there and a blackboard. And so that was the tutoring or the instruction area if students wanted some formal teaching or wanted a blackboard for something. You had 5 computers set up in the computer area. There was a lounge area with a TV and a couch they had brought in. And on the other side, the arts and hands-on area had some tables for doing art. And so they had set it up this way. The blue that you see there, one of them, the thinner one, is cubicle partitions that we were able to bring in. And the other thicker blue was a partition with shelves stacked on top of each other up to about 5 feet, 6 feet or so. And then the central area was just wide open. It didn't feel like we were chopped off into 4 areas. It felt quite open, and so it was a good space where we could all get together also if we wanted to. 25 people working in one classroom doesn't always provide the space that students need. So this is the hallway outside the classroom. There's the balcony that you see there. There's the hallway, but we also took advantage of the art room, the library, and other spaces. We didn't feel that it had to be teachers' eyes on the students all the time. There was a trust there, which it proved itself that the students were worthy of our trust. That they could go off to the art room, which was empty during one of the periods that my colleague was in there. He was the art teacher, so the room sat empty when he was there, and the students could go in there without supervision. They could be elsewhere in the hallways, maybe outside under a tree or whatever. We didn't feel we had to have our eyes on them all the time, and so it wasn't a case of 25 students in the room the whole time. And so where are we here? This is what the school looks like inside. It's been an addition and a renovation since I was there, but it's a great facility. Those little circles that you see there, if I were on the website, they would take me off to the music room, the art room, the auto shop, the woodworking shop, and you can get a good idea of what the facility involves. And I think we're at the stage where people who want a democratic approach to learning need to be given equal access to facilities like this. There's no way that the dominant paradigm should have full control over this. There are too many of us now that see the need for something different, and we've got to start exploring how that can happen. The four approaches that I've presented here provide that. And so with that, and given that there's not a lot of time left, if you're to be looking at the notes that I provided, there's still so many unanswered questions that people would have to what I've just presented here. And so in the notes, I've listed a number of the things that people ask and would want to know more about as they try to get a feel that this is actually something that would work. And so what I'd like to do is, with the time that we have left, turn it over to anybody who would like to ask a question, make a comment. The floor is yours now. And so if you raise your hand, I can give you the floor. If you want to put something in chat, don't feel you have to ask questions that are in the notes. Ask anything that you would like to ask.
Richard, I have a question.
Yes.
Can I ask it with my words rather than in chat?
Absolutely.
I wonder how you manage the use of tech in a self-directed learning environment with regards to games and things, because with games having an addictive quality, but still having some learning capacity, I just wonder how you manage that. So for me and my self-led, the children that I taught in a self-directed learning environment, we didn't really use tech because they didn't want to, because they were playing and exploring and socializing. But I just wonder how you manage that.
So the program ran in the early 1990s. We didn't so much have that problem of kids on their devices at that time. Peter Gray doesn't concern himself with that. I don't know if you know who Peter Gray is, but he's one of the champions of self-directed education. He's not worried about that. He figures students are going to learn what they need for life, and we don't have to worry about it. I'm not as convinced as that. And I also, though, think that if you have a really stimulating learning environment with lots of sparking going on, and it's healthier, kids are actually walking to school, finding their own way to school, they're physically active, that they're going to rather be with their friends than on their devices. So what I witnessed in our program, it was grades 10 to 12, so across age mix there. The one little story, there were these two boys. One of the criteria was that if you wanted to take this program, you had to be agreeable to helping to create a community learning environment. There were 2 grade 12 boys in there that ended up taking the program because they had gotten interested in computers. So we're starting to tip into that period of time, and they just want to be on the computers all day long. At that time, it was to learn computer programming. And to digress a moment there, one of the parents had access to computer programming software that was state of the art. And so she was able to get copies of that program for her son and his friend. And so they were able to work on the computers at a level beyond what the school board was providing with an older, less powerful programming language. And so these 2 students went into the program, and we might think in terms of devices here, that they just want to be on their device all day. And they really just, they confessed to me 6 weeks in that they actually duped me, was the way they worded it, that they had no interest at all in associating with the little grade 10 kids. And what they confessed to me was that within 6 weeks, they didn't even notice the age differences anymore, that we were all just family and people at that point, which is one of the things that just motivates me so much to want to see more of this explored. And the relationships among the kids, with the lounge area that we had, and the free flow chance to talk to people when they want to talk to them, it became a lot more social than anything I had seen in a school before. And I think that something that gives us hope if we get education working better is some of the observations that when children have a chance, young people have a chance to really be together in relationship with others, that they don't want to be on their devices. They would rather be right there enjoying each other in whatever way they're enjoying each other. And that this obsession with devices is partly because we have the kids so bored all day that all they want to do is hype up on something that stimulates them when they get a chance to do it.
I completely agree. That was my experience from teaching the group of young children, is that they didn't have the desire to go on the devices. I just wondered if it changes, and that it was such a happy space. That, like you say, older children were wanting to come into my classroom and leave their classrooms, which is possibly why I got so much resistance from other teachers, because it was quite polarizing.
Can you tell us a little more about your program then, Sonia? Because it sounds
So
like
I'm just a teacher, but I was employed by a principal, just a teacher, but I was employed by a teacher principal because I believe in self-directed learning and play-based learning, and that children should have the freedom to choose everything. And so a principal chose for me to go into her school to teach in that way. But she didn't have the buy-in from all other staff, and so it was very confronting for them. Then another team within the school, which is the Māori unit, which is the cultural group in New Zealand, the native people, chose for me to then go into their unit and do the same thing. But like I say, it was very polarizing. My children were allowed to walk around where I could see them. They could go inside and outside. They were able to eat when they were hungry. They were able to learn what they wanted to learn when they wanted to learn it. And it wasn't 20%, it was all day. So it was from the moment they arrived. And then I used learning stories to assess their learning. And they just naturally learnt the things that they needed curriculum-wise to learn at that stage. But then as they followed through from my classroom the following year, they weren't compliant. And so it resulted in a crisis where a teacher tried to physically restrain a child, and then I was called back in by the parents of the children. But it resulted in a huge crisis within the school. Like, it kind of imploded, and people just couldn't cope. They just couldn't cope with you could, and you could see it worked. So the children that I taught then 2 years on were highly successful while they were with me, but they couldn't be highly successful outside of my learning space. So it was very polarizing, very polarizing.
I had some similar experience with the program that I ran, but there's I would say there's a book by Glasser, The Quality School, and in there he talks about a small quality school within a bigger school, and he said that when you have competing philosophies under the same roof, you have the propensity for one to sabotage the other, or for them to sabotage each other. And I would say that my colleague and I were as bad at sabotaging traditional education as the traditionalists were at sabotaging our efforts. But because there were so many of them, they powered over us, essentially. That situation occurred primarily because that supportive principle that helped us get the program started got transferred. And so we lost our champion. And the new principal wasn't against us, but he wasn't for us. So he was blowing in the wind, whatever way the pressure seemed to most mount. So he wasn't there for us when we needed him to keep the program going. In the years since the program ran, I've reflected a lot on how do you avoid the sabotaging taking place, and all you need really is a good administrator. The Souvame school administrator appears to be a good example of how an administrator can exert the influence over the staff that you don't have that taking place. And so if I were to be in the position of a principal or a leader in the school, and there were two programs taking place, I would just simply establish that nobody badmouths the other program, that we're professionals, and it's student choice. You just, as openly and honestly as you can, present what might be the benefits to what you're offering, and no negativity about what other people are offering. And that's the professional stance, period. And then people can choose what matters to them. Derry, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I was going to ask Sonia. Sonia and I had a little exchange in the chat, and I was going to ask Sonia if she felt, how long ago was this, and have you talked to some of the kids who had the experience of being in your class, and did they feel that they were disadvantaged because of the way you've done things, or that they developed some kind of resilience and some skills for dealing with it? My own experience was, I'm glad I wasn't on my own, because you very soon see resistance to what you're trying to do. And I was very fortunate in having a principal that realized there would be some problems, and also in being able to put a team of teachers together. Because once you're not on your own, I always feel if there's two of you, you've got the strength of four. If there's three of you, it's like the square of the number involved. But being on your own is just one, and it's bloody difficult. It was interesting for me to talk to the kids years later who'd been in my class for 2 years and then had gone into normal mainstream classes. They nearly all said it really set them up, but perhaps this is just the ones that I've got back in touch with. It's not all of them. It's only about 10 out of the 30. But can I go back and ask my question again, Sonia? Do you think you disadvantaged the kids by giving them that experience, or not?
No, I could not ever go back to the way that I taught before. I had resistance from so many people, but the people who never resisted were the children and the children's parents. So Just this morning when I was coming onto this meeting, and at 6:30 in the morning, one of the mothers texted me who is currently involved within the crisis to say how grateful she was that I went back last year. So it was the last 2 years that I've taught, how grateful she was that I went back last year to support her son, and that it's changed his life. So they're 5, 6, and 7, the children that I've impacted. So now they would be 6, 7, and 8. They are powerful. They're connected. So as a group, they're very strongly connected to each other. They have strong connections within the school with the older children, and the older children who were struggling in the mainstream education would come into my classroom and ask to stay in the classroom. And the teachers who were, teachers sometimes do want those children out of their classroom. And so those children then formed relationships with the children in the community, those older children who are problematic in school. Hug me hello, because that is the cultural way. The parents are happy to see me. It is the most beautiful way of being, but it's very difficult. So the principal left, which meant that I didn't have her support. I did have the support of one of my team leaders who asked me to work with her so she could learn more about it. But it's just a natural, beautiful way of being. I could never go back, no matter what. But it's so frustrating seeing my own and other people's children not getting the freedom to choose. But yes, no, I do not think they were disadvantaged. I think potentially they were maybe not learning the curriculum things as quickly, but the things that they were learning were so essential to their future learning that they couldn't have done it a different way, in my belief. They couldn't have done it the other way around without losing immense parts of themselves.
I like the way you expressed it, Derry, where you said it kind of set them up for going back into regular classes. And I found that too when the students had a semester with me and then they went back into regular classes. I saw no signs of them being worse off as a result. If anything, they accepted it more, they understood the teacher's position more, and they were more focused on learning what they had to learn to get their credits. Renee?
Yes, can I just ask a question? And also it was really nice to hear. I've met you before. We've talked. We've at different different education online conferences, kind of things. This was really great to understand your background in this. So thank you. I just had a question about the information that's on the Operi website. The link that you gave us.
Right.
Is everything there referencing what happened like back in this early 90s? It's because the dates on the posts and stuff, and there's like some dates from 2017, 2018. So as I understand this, I just want to be clear. The program was only operated those 2 years that you were involved with it.
Right.
Okay. And so the website, it has some dates on it that show 2018 and 17, but it's like publishing after the fact.
Yes, that time of reflection on how do we grow this idea? How do we make it work more workable? That website, I got involved with another organization, Uniting for Children and Youth. So I stopped basically working that Operi website because I found that we had to get the conversation going more. People weren't, there just weren't enough people prepared to actually imagine something different in order to make that kind of change happen. It was a fluky set of circumstances that allowed us to run the program in the first place, which is a bit of a long story, but those kinds of programs don't get underway easily. There has to be some kind of unusual situation that allows them to happen. And they're really vulnerable. They're going to be shut down as soon as somebody comes along that finds they're a nuisance in some way. And so I stopped working that and start working on growing the conversation instead. But I go back and post some thoughts that I had in retrospect at times. And a lot of the links that are there are to people who are still active today, talking about educational change and imagining new possibilities.
Thank you for that, because I've done so much research and or collection of like websites and where things are happening, and it helps me frame that, okay, this is actually referring to a project that did happen.
Yeah.
Not currently. Okay, thank you.
So what I want to do with it is I'm going to get rid of that title on it, OPERI, which is the Ottawa Public Education Remake Initiative. Probably poorly chosen in the first place, because right away you've got the backs up of the people who run public education. Like who am I to be suggesting a remake when they're the experts? And so I've got to get a less offensive name going, but also not have it looked at in terms of the one program, the CHIP program, but rather the generalities and the various ways that it could be applied. It doesn't have to be applied the way I applied it. There's a lot of flexibility involved, and one of the things that we're looking at scalability for one thing, but also when you have two competing schools under the same roof, you don't compete. You complement each other in various ways, so you can have some flow back and forth, and so just looking at all the possibilities for enriching the learning environment for all of the students, not to create an isolated situation where you're off in your little corner and you're not having anything to do with the others. It's community of learning, and here's one alternative, and try everything. We're past the time that was designated for this. I do not mind staying on if there are questions, but anybody who has had enough, would like to move on, it's over an hour and a half, feel welcome to do so. And so I'll see if anybody stays behind, has a question or two. I'll be glad to be here till 2:30 if you like. So really appreciate you being here, and Derry, great to have you here to comment on things that you've done, because what I set up there at first, you were so involved with the unschooling school and the free learner concept. Your 20% proposal for free learning, that amount of a school day has influenced a lot of people. And then Suvame, you're one of the featured people there. So to have you on this call was to me really, really great, supportive, appreciate it. And Sonia, where are you located?
I'm in a place called Mount Maunganui in New Zealand. Yes, I need to find more of us and create some kind of little group, because I sometimes feel like I'm out on a limb.
I think most people who have been fighting this have felt that way and still do, but there's so much encouraging about it. There were a couple of sessions this morning with the Learning Planet that involved youth and what adults are doing to engage the youth conversations going on. We are definitely getting somewhere. I'm really, the more I look into what the Learning Planet is doing, the more I think that, and UNESCO is behind it, the more I think that UNESCO is really getting things rolling. But the more that we get into these conversations, join things like the Learning Planet, the more we'll be able to have some influence and get this idea of non-coercive learning more explored, more pilot programs going, more pressure on public systems to share the money for those that want something different.
He's hoping it doesn't take too long.
Yes, because I kind of see that education is what will save us if we do it right.
I agree. And every year that goes past, I feel like that's a whole cohort of children that didn't get to experience freedom.
Yeah, I would suspect you've seen the film Schooling the World.
I haven't.
The message that it conveys that is that if you want to change a culture, you have to change how young people get their education or how young people educate themselves. And so we have to change our culture. We're screaming down the path to destruction the way we're going with the consumerism and the spoiling of the planet. That kind of pressure seems to be understood by the people of the United Nations with their sustainable development goals. And so I think there's a real opportunity to make progress fairly quickly. But we have to unite. We've got to get there behind each other and join the conversations that might be a little too conservative, just to interject ideas that are a little more challenging. You have a comment?
I agree.
And never doubt that a thoughtful group of concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, is the only thing that ever have. That's Margaret Mead. Thank you guys so much for today. I really appreciate the chance to learn from you, Richard and Derry, and it's great to have the experience to be around you guys and get to know you.
Thanks, Amber. Where are you from?
Yeah. I'm from California. I live in Alabama, and we're currently in Quartzsite, Arizona.
All right, covering the U.S.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. Y'all have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Richard, I put in the chat for Sonia APDEC, a link to APDEC. Maybe you already know them, but there was an International Democratic Education Conference a couple of years ago in Nelson, and there's quite a group of democratic educators in New Zealand. Anyway, APDEC is the link. It's Australasia and Pacific Democratic Education Council.
Wonderful. Thank you, Derry. There are some amazing people here leading the charge. It's just so hard when you're in a classroom to connect with them in ways that are simple. So I've got that link now. Appreciate it. I will look them up.